Let's not pretend, sir, you weren't going to pay for this. Every eye in the checkout line swiveled to the jar of instant coffee held aloft in the assistant manager's grasp, and then to the old man who stood motionless, his grip tightening on his shopping basket, which contains nothing else of significant value. Art Miller, had been inside the market for no more than 10 minutes. A loaf of sourdough, a carton of orange juice, the coffee. That was it. He moved with a deliberate slowness, his right hip aching from an old wound that predated nearly everyone in the store. The worn patch on his old jacket showed a unit crest so faded by time and sun it was almost unrecognizable. At the checkout, the young woman at the register scanned his items without a word. The queue behind him edged forward. Suddenly, a jarring, unfamiliar beep sounded, and the cashier's hand stopped in its tracks. From the other side of the store, Kevin Vance, the assistant manager, approached like a predator sensing an opportunity. At 29, brimming with confidence from a recent promotion, Kevin enjoyed setting an example. He snatched the coffee jar off the counter, displaying it for all to see as if it were illegal evidence. "This item wasn't on the conveyor belt," he declared, his voice loud enough for several aisles to hear. "It seems you were trying to hide it in your bag." Art's gaze lifted slowly, his weathered face a mask of neutrality. "He placed it right there," he stated, his voice quiet but firm. "Of course you did. It's a classic move. Act confused, play on people's sympathy. We get your type in here all the time." A low, unkind chuckle emanated from someone in the line. A teenager let out a snort. A man near the candy display smirked as if his own cynical worldview had just been confirmed. Art offered no reply. His right hand had a slight tremor, not from anxiety, but from the lasting nerve damage that was a permanent souvenir of his service. Kevin gestured to the cashier. "Get security over here. I want this documented." The young woman looked uneasy. "Sir, maybe he just forgot." "No," Kevin interrupted her. "Policy is policy. We don't tolerate shoplifters." And so, Arthur Miller, a man who had once navigated a field of live mines to rescue wounded comrades, was now standing under the harsh fluorescent lights of a supermarket, being tried by a jury of strangers who knew nothing of his past, with a $7 jar of coffee serving as the sole measure of his character. Art stood his ground as the store's single security guard, a thin man in an ill-fitting uniform, made his way from the entrance. The whispers around him intensified. Some shoppers craned their necks to get a better view. Others just shook their heads, certain they were watching the pathetic end of a man's dignity. Kevin Vance puffed out his chest, as if the guard's arrival validated his accusation. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to turn out your pockets." Art's gaze remained steady. He deliberately placed his basket on the counter, reached into the pocket of his worn trousers, and produced a scuffed black wallet. The leather was creased with age, its seams worn thin. He opened it without ceremony, revealing an old military ID and a small, heavy coin that glinted under the store lights.
"Great gimmick," Kevin scoffed, taking a step closer. "You can get those knockoffs anywhere online. The whole veteran costume, IDs, patches, coins. Some guys are really committed to the performance." In the adjacent checkout lane, a woman loading her cart stopped cold. Sarah Jenkins, in her late 30s, had been minding her own business until the design on the coin registered. An eagle clutching a cluster of arrows. She froze. That symbol was not for general circulation. She had only seen it once, in a top-secret intelligence briefing where all notes had to be left in the room. She moved closer to the scene, her eyes locked on the coin. Kevin was still talking, but his voice had faded into the background. "Can I help you?" Kevin's sharp tone broke her concentration. Sarah met his gaze, then gestured toward the coin in Art's hand. "Where did you receive that?" she asked, her voice low. Art's eyes met hers for a fleeting second. "It was given to me," he said simply. The guard looked back and forth between them, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. Kevin just rolled his eyes. Probably bought it at a surplus store. Meanwhile, in the cluttered back office, the store's bookkeeper was reviewing the daily incident reports. When the name Arthur Miller appeared on the list of banned individuals, his fingers froze over the keyboard. He recognized that name. He'd seen it etched in bronze on the town's war memorial in the section for Vietnam veterans. He also knew that the same memorial had been restored with a large anonymous donation years ago. He grabbed the office phone and dialed a number not found in any public records. His voice was tense and hushed. "We have a code red. Miller. Yes, Arthur Miller. He's here, in the store, right now." Back at the registers, Sarah's voice sliced through Kevin's lecture. "I suggest you put the coffee back in his bag." "Look, ma'am, with all due respect, you don't know what's going on." Sarah's expression hardened. "I know precisely what's going on." She gave the security guard a look that communicated this was now out of his hands. The guard faltered, realizing he might be in over his head. Art remained perfectly still, his posture unwavering. He had endured far worse than this. Yet, as the confrontation simmered, the atmosphere in the market began to subtly shift, building toward a resolution no one there could have possibly imagined. Sarah Jenkins didn't waste another word on Kevin Vance. She had no need to. She simply took a step back, melting into the background as she pulled out her phone. Moving toward the automatic doors, away from the prying eyes, she selected a number deep within her contacts. The call was answered on the first ring. A man's voice, sharp and professional, said only, "Report." Eagleclaw. Miller. Present location. A brief silence followed. Just a heartbeat, but it was filled with significance. "What is his status?" "Oakwood Grocers, Redford, Oregon. He's being detained. Remain on site." The call ended. Inside the store, Kevin was still pressing his point. "Sir, as I was saying, until this is resolved, you're not—" The security guard shifted his weight, his discomfort obvious. "Look, maybe we can just—" Kevin silenced him with a dismissive wave. "Handle it." Art hadn't flinched. His weight was balanced on his good leg, the jar of coffee a silent testament on the counter. His hands were at his sides, his wallet and coins safely back in his pocket, but his bearing, solid, unyielding, broadcast that no amount of public shaming would break him. In the back office, the bookkeeper spoke urgently into the phone. "Yes?" "Miller. Arthur Miller. Vietnam, Gulf War. He's here at my store." On the other end of the line, a much older man's voice crackled with sudden awareness. "Do not let him leave your sight." The bookkeeper turned his chair to face the grainy security monitor. Art was there at checkout 4, looking just as he did in the old photographs. Older, marked by time, but with that same unshakable core of stillness. Outside, Sarah's call had already unleashed a chain of events. Within 10 minutes, a black sedan cruised past the store, its windows heavily tinted. 2 more identical vehicles followed, circling the block but never parking. 15 minutes after the call, the deep rumble of a powerful engine echoed across the parking lot. A black SUV pulled in aggressively, its tires chirping as it came to an abrupt stop by the entrance. The driver's door was already opening before the vehicle came to a complete rest. Out stepped General Wallace. He was in his impeccable dress blues, his chest adorned with rows of ribbons and medals that gleamed in the Oregon sunlight. His cap was held neatly under his arm,
His stride was powerful, and his face was set like stone. The automatic doors slid open for him as if they sensed his authority. All conversation ceased. A shopping cart rolled into a display with a loud clang as its owner stared. The ambient noise of the store seemed to fade away, replaced by the crisp, authoritative sound of his dress shoes on the tiled floor. General Wallace did not scan the aisles or hesitate for a second. His gaze found Arthur Miller the moment he stepped inside. Kevin Vance, completely unaware of the approaching storm, had just opened his mouth to escalate the situation when the general was upon him. Then, in full view of every stunned shopper and employee, the general of the United States Armed Forces halted before the accused thief, drew himself to attention, and executed a salute so sharp and precise it seemed to slice the air. "Colonel Arthur Miller," General Wallace declared, his voice ringing with authority, "the commander who saved the 3rd Brigade in the Al-Hamar Pass, and the man to whom I owe my life." The store went completely, profoundly silent. The smirk vanished from Kevin's face as if it had been wiped clean. The cashier's jaw dropped. A mother in the next lane leaned down and whispered to her son, who instinctively straightened his posture.
Art did not move immediately or return the salute. His eyes met the general's for a long, quiet moment before his own hand rose, slower than it once had been, but firm and true, to return the gesture. "General," Art acknowledged quietly. Wallace turned his head to face Kevin, his voice unwavering. "Is this the individual you accused of theft?" Kevin could only stammer. This man," Wallace continued, his voice cutting through the silence. "This man once coordinated emergency airdrops in a combat zone to resupply troops cut off from support. One of those supplies," he said, glancing at the coffee, "was this very brand. A lifeline in care packages he personally ensured got through under heavy fire." Kevin took an involuntary step back. The security guard stared at his shoes, wishing he could disappear. Sarah Jenkins had moved closer, her gaze fixed on the eagle and arrows emblem. "Sir," she said respectfully to the general, "he carries the coin." Wallace gave a single firm nod, as is his right. The general turned back to Art. "We have been in possession of something of yours for quite some time." He signaled to an aide who had entered behind him, a young captain who now presented a small felt-lined box. When Wallace opened it, the store lights reflected off a medal inscribed with the words, "For Valor Unseen." He presented it, his voice softening slightly. "This was supposed to be awarded to you 29 years ago." Art stared at the medal for a moment before accepting it. He closed the box, his thumb tracing the clasp. "That's not why I'm here," he said at last. "I made a promise to someone I lost, and I intend to keep it." For a full minute, nobody in the store breathed. Then Sarah, standing tall, raised her hand in a crisp salute. 2 older gentlemen near the dairy case did the same. Soon, others, veterans, active-duty members on leave, and even ordinary citizens, stood a little straighter, their faces filled with a solemn respect. Even those who didn't fully grasp the details understood they were part of something profound. Kevin Vance was frozen in place, his face pale. His earlier arrogance had evaporated into thin air. In the back office, the bookkeeper put down the phone and simply watched the monitor, a small, knowing smile on his face. Outside, the other black vehicles had established a discreet perimeter, their occupants standing by, watching the parking lot. For Arthur Miller, the world had gone quiet. The metal felt heavy in his hand, weighted with the history it represented. He slipped it into his jacket pocket next to the worn wallet,
the challenge coin, and the deep understanding that some honors are carried in the heart, not on the chest. Wallace did not turn to leave. Instead, he took a step back, ensuring his voice would carry. "This man," he announced, gesturing to Art, "has contributed more to this nation and to his fellow service members than most people could ever comprehend. And for what? To be accused of stealing coffee? Let me be perfectly clear. That coffee is the same kind we fought to get halfway around the globe in packages that Colonel Miller risked his own life to deliver."
The words settled over the crowd with immense weight. Near the bread aisle, a young man took off his hat. A woman in a business suit who had been heading for the exit stopped and turned to face them. Wallace locked his eyes on Kevin Vance. "If you cannot tell the difference between a criminal and a hero, you have no right to pass judgment on another human being." Kevin swallowed hard, his face a mask of shame, unable to form a single word. Sarah Jenkins's voice rang out, clear and strong. "All veterans, attention." A rustle of movement swept through the store. The two men from the dairy aisle, a woman near the registers, and a teenager in a military-style jacket who wasn't old enough to have served but stood at attention anyway. Salutes were rendered, clean and proud. Even the non-veterans seemed to stand taller, as if acknowledging they had participated in a collective misjudgment that was now being corrected. Wallace allowed the moment to hang in the air before he spoke again. "Some people display their service for all to see. Others carry it in their scars, in their memories, and in the profound weight of their deeds. Colonel Miller has carried it in silence for decades. That ends now." The young aide came forward again, took the medal from its box, and pinned it to the left breast of Art's old jacket. Art glanced down at it, then said softly, "I didn't do it for a medal. I did it because I gave my word to a friend that I'd never forget." With that, he picked up his groceries, gave a final nod to General Wallace, and walked toward the exit. The salutes remained in place until the glass doors slid shut behind him. Arthur Miller stepped out into the crisp afternoon air, the medal now resting deep in his pocket beside the coin and wallet. There were no news crews, no requests for an interview. A week later, a new, polished brass plaque was installed above the supermarket's customer service counter. It read, "In recognition of Colonel Arthur Miller, a hero in plain sight." There was no mention of the incident, no reference to the coffee. But in that small Oregon town, the story was known. And from that day on, its residents thought twice before making assumptions about a quiet old man with worn-out clothes and a steady gaze.